going to have the funding to be able to continue that major project. So that is another major impact that's reflected in this draft 10-year plan. When we talk about debt service here, because all of the 93 work to date is being funded by bonds. Garvey bonds is a financing mechanism where we borrow money and we pledge our future federal aid to pay back those bonds. So right now we have about $80 million worth of work that's underway in the corridor. We have borrowed money to pay for that construction. We have an obligation to pay those bonds back, and that debt service right now on that active work averages about $7 million per year. So we need to pay that debt service. That's our obligation. I mentioned that we had several other projects waiting in the wings to go, and we have, via the state legislature, authorization to bond an additional $115 million to support the next tier of projects that are needed to complete the priority improvements in the corridor. If we went ahead with those 3 projects and bonded those, the debt service for that total amount of financing would be more in the order of magnitude of about $25 million per year, and that's reflected under the, when it's labeled currently, it's a little bit of a misnomer. Someone has called us on that before. That would be the debt service if we went ahead with those projects. But given the funding outlook, we don't think it's prudent to take on that additional commitment, that additional obligation of debt service at this time. So again, I get back to the fact that the I-93 project, a major project, is being deferred at this time. The other area that I need to point out, because I know it's generated a lot of discussion at our past GACIT hearings, deals with this 4th line in terms of designated federal programs. Some of our federal aid funding comes with allocations towards certain types of work and certain types of program. We get federal funds and say we have to put so much money towards these types of programs, and those are programs such as the Transportation Enhancement Program, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, Scenic Byways, Safe Routes to School, Highway Safety Improvement Program. Those programs come with a certain allocation of federal funds that total approximately what's shown there in the current list, about $33 million per year. We are afforded the latitude, the flexibility with those funds to transfer or flex up to 50% of those funds for those programs towards other more core highway or bridge funding categories. And in this proposed draft 10-year plan update, you'll see probably an inordinate reduction in funding towards those designated federal programs. Part of the proposal is to take advantage of that flexibility and flex some of those funds, about 50% of those funds, towards those core highway and bridge programs, so that we can maintain that investment in maintenance and preservation in red list bridges. So again, under this funding scenario, there are things that have to give, and that's reflected in this draft 10-year plan. The final line there deals with other projects, and that's kind of everything else. That's kind of all those other 10-year plan projects. A number of them are earmarked projects. A number of them are projects that are underway that we have commitments towards. A number of those are smaller, more modest safety improvements, intersection improvements, and things like that have long been in the 10-year plan that again have a priority in terms of safety and addressing some of those needs. But again, there has been a reduction in those, and most of those are reflected. Most of those reductions are reflected in this deferred projects list. So that's a very broad summary of the kind of major issues dealing with and associated with the federal aid program. Again, I led off with that because the federal aid program is probably the biggest piece in the lion's share of our program. So reductions in federal aid have probably the biggest impact on the projects and the biggest impact on the 10-year plan. Moving along, if you go back, remember I outlined that pie chart, and this was all talking about that biggest blue piece of the pie, but there are a number of other programs that are contained in the 10-year plan, and I'd just like to touch on some of those and some of the issues with those. And on page 7, there's a summary of some of the other highway-funded programs. These are more of the state-funded programs. The betterment program is funded by 3 cents of the gas tax. 3 cents of the 18-cent gas tax goes to the betterment program, and that's generally intended for smaller, more heavy maintenance type of projects. That's the funding, that's the resources that our local maintenance districts have to work with to do a lot of their heavy maintenance on the roads and highways around the state. It's funded at the $22.5 million per year. That's approximately what 3 cents of the gas tax generates. That funding level has been at that level for a number of years, and over time, as that funding level has stayed constant, but construction costs and paving costs and everything else has gone up, we are doing less and less work with that same amount of funds. Our goal, and about 10 years ago, we were at that goal of paving about 500 miles of state roads a year. There's about 4,500 miles of state roads. So roughly once every 10 years, state highways should receive some pavement treatment, some attention to keep it in, passable condition and maintain the condition of the existing system. What that funding has been able to buy over the years has slowly eroded to the point that we're doing approximately 200 to 250 miles of paving a year, which means longer time in between paving and making it harder and harder to get to roads with less traffic and roads that are not that they're less of a priority, but because they carry less traffic, they tend to get the short end of the stick. And those are like the secondary state routes and the unnumbered state routes that we continue to have a challenge keeping up with the paving needs and keeping up with maintaining the condition of those types of roads. And they continue to deteriorate. We are not keeping up with the maintenance needs and keeping up with maintaining the condition of those roads. 2 years ago in the state budget, there was some recognition of that need, and as part of the registration fee surcharge, $15 million of that surcharge was going to augment the betterment program to get at some of those maintenance needs and to try to address a number of those secondary state routes and unnumbered state routes. But the registration fee surcharge was sunsetted at the end of the last biennium. It wasn't renewed. So with the betterment program, we're back to the $22.5 million a year. And again, a real tough time keeping up with the maintaining the condition of those roads, and it's going to continue to be a challenge keeping up with those needs. The other two programs on that sheet are statutorily funded at those levels indicated. The state aid bridge program in particular is one of the few resources that the state provides funds for the local municipalities to address their infrastructure needs. We do a lot with that funding, working with the municipalities. To access those funds, it requires a 20% match from the local municipality. Again, that program, the state aid bridge program, is getting to the point that it's getting very over-programmed. We are programming projects with the communities under that funding beyond 2019, meaning that if the town has a structurally deficient bridge or a bridge that they need to address, and they apply to the program, they can't expect to see funding to address that bridge for 8, 9, 10 years from now. So again, it is a concern that that program, very popular, very worthwhile program, is getting to be very strained and very over-programmed. Turning ahead, and on page 8, I should have referred to this. I did a lot of discussion about the funding of the betterment program. On page 8 is a kind of a breakdown, similar to what I did for the federal highway program, of the types of projects and the categories of projects that those betterment funds address. On page 9 of this handout, there's information on the turnpike system. I presume everybody is aware of the difference. The turnpike system is roads like the Spalding Turnpike and I-95 and the F.E. Everett Turnpike. Those are roads that are under the turnpike system. They are solely supported by the tolls on that system. There are no other state funds or no other federal funds that go into those, that go into maintaining those roads and taking care of those roads. The maintenance and capital improvements are all dependent on the toll revenues generated from the tolls on the turnpike. And we do have a very active turnpike capital program. Obviously, the folks around Rochester, you see the work going on the Spalding Turnpike. The toll revenues and the toll increase that went into effect at the end of, I think it was 2009, enabled us to get those projects done and underway. So we presently have about $450 million of capital improvement work going on the turnpike system that's either completed or underway or forthcoming. We do have another $110 million of projects that have been authorized, but they aren't currently funded in order to do those projects. And they're listed there. They're projects like doing open road tolling at the Hooksett Toll Plaza and the Bedford Toll Plaza. And also, probably of interest in this area, is the completion of the Newington-Dover project. We have a lot of work going underway right now with the major bridge over the Little Bay between Newington and Dover. This spring we'll be letting the project to rebuild and reconstruct the turnpike and the interchanges on the Newington side. But the Dover side of that project, the Dover interchange at exit 6, is currently authorized, but it is not funded. It's pending some future toll increase to fund the rest of that project. So it is listed, it is contained in the 10-year plan, it is still part of our program, but I just wanted to point out that it is dependent on future toll increases to fund that work. And also on page 19, we've outlined a number of future additional turnpike capital priorities that we feel we need to address some of those needs on the turnpike. Those are listed there. Some of the major projects involve continuing the work on the F.E. Everett Turnpike between Merrimack and Bedford, and widening it to a consistent 3-lane facility in each direction, addressing some of the older and more congested interchanges in the Manchester area, and also addressing I-93 as it travels through Concord, an area that is very much over capacity and has a lot of geometric and safety issues as well too. So those are some of the 3 major future turnpike projects that we'd like to get to. I point them out because we have included them and listed them in this draft 10-year plan, but they are included with the caveat that they are dependent on a future system-wide toll increase to fund those improvements. And also there are some future needs that we see along the Spalding Turnpike to upgrade the Dover Toll Plaza and the Rochester Toll Plaza as well. Ideally, those would be converted, those would be reconstructed to enable open road tolling there as well. So that's a brief overview of the turnpike system. On page 11, there's information on the public transportation component of our program.